So, I'll give you a little bit of background on who I am. I'm obviously realizing that this is probably quite small. Can you read it if you really squeeze your eyes? Or some of you are like, what is that on the screen? Well, just to give you a little bit of background about who I am. As Paul mentioned, I have been involved in green science for just over 20 years now. I'm also a member of the Institute of Functional Medicine. Don't know if any of you know what that is. It's basically where you're treating the cause, not the symptoms. So it is traditional medicine, but you're really focusing on treating the cause. And of course, that's what we apply when we formulate products. We're looking at the cause of different skin conditions. I've had the great pleasure of working with many doctors, such as David Perlmutter. If any of you have not read The Grain Brain yet, I know, Lark, you have. It's a good read. Tina, you've read it. So I was very honored to contribute to the first edition of that with respects to skin and using gluten-containing products topically. We've also worked with Dr. Mark Hyman. I've contributed content for his book, and also Frank Lipman, who's based in New York. All of these, which you might not be able to read, but all of these organizations here I've worked with at some point or other. We were one of the very, very first companies to achieve UK Soil Association. That back then was the Rolls-Royce of eco-symbols. They tell you what you can't use, but of course there's very little support as to what you can use. And that's really how we got our start, making our own ingredients from scratch. Our royal patron, still to this day, is His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. And we actually have a real-life butler. He just did that when I mentioned his name. And of course, we've worked with, as Paul said, very, very large companies, all the way down to celebrity physicians as well. So it's been an amazing experience. So I just wanted to highlight some other industries which are green. And the first one here is green architecture. Now, this is an amazing museum in Paris. This is L'Acquis de Branly. And as you can see, you've got the Eiffel Tower right behind it. But as you can see, all those vertical walls are absolutely covered in plants indigenous to Paris. So yes, they can put up with the cold and the rain and the heat and everything else. And actually, I would say this is probably one of the best museums just because of what they've actually done as far as blending in with the environment and being truly, truly sustainable. That right there is an amazing example of a green architect or a green building. Green fashion and textiles. Well, some of you may or may not know, but fashion plays, just in case you can't read the small print, fashion plays a major role in the global economy. If you think about it, we wear clothes, tablecloths, you know, the carpet, everything that you can possibly imagine comes from the textile industry. And it's actually worth around 1 trillion with a T globally. And of course it supports hundreds, if not millions of jobs around the world. Now, second to oil, this is probably another statistic you may not know, fashion and textiles is the most polluting industry in the world. Did you know that? You didn't know that. Do you feel really bad now? Don't feel bad. Every stage of a garment, actually, it's threatening our planet and our planet's resources. And I've just sort of put a little example up here. It can take more than 20,000 litres of water to produce 1 kilogram, which is not that much, of cotton. So that would equate to a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. 20,000 litres of water. And that's not including all of the energy as well. And then, of course, if you look at the life cycle of our clothes, what happens if we, want to buy another shirt or a pair of jeans? We probably just toss it away, or maybe we donate it. But green fashion or green textiles is about sort of enhancing the life cycle of that particular garment. So when you think of brands like Stella McCartney as an example, she's doing an amazing job. Now I know she's very expensive because she's very high end, but there are other brands who are producing eco-type bikinis, swimwear, shoes, handbags. Gosh, even TJ Maxx is actually selling recycled bags. I mean, if you look at the bag, it just looks like leather, except it's from recycled plastics. And I think a big, beautiful shoulder bag was like $49.99, and you would never know. So it's out there. It's just a question of once you become aware of this, then you can start going and searching for this. Let's get back to green cosmetics. So green cosmetics is everything that you see right here down on that little chart there. But green principles are all about predominantly ethical sourcing of ingredients, organic, sustainable production methods, like I was sort of explaining with the textile industry. It's reducing our burden on the planet, energy source and use, and then of course water as well. But what we look at, which is slightly different in green cosmetics, is we're also looking at another environment besides our planet. We're looking at our skin's environment and what our skin needs. And our skin isn't really a very complicated organ. It's actually quite a sort of a simple organ, just as long as we give it what it needs. And what it actually needs is it needs a diversity of good microbiome. It needs to be kept mildly acidic, which we'll talk about later. And we always want to be encouraging the skin's natural functions. Most cosmetics, when I say cosmetics, I'm actually talking about personal care as well. They don't actually allow our skin to perform its natural functions. And then, of course, we always want to treat the cause, not the symptoms. Now, I was having a conversation about this very subject. Does clean and green mean the same thing? No, it doesn't. They are polar opposites. When you think about clean food is basically minimally processed and closest to its natural beginnings, basically. So the further you get away from that, the more processing actually takes place. So that is a clean ingredient, closest to nature or in its least processed state. So what would that be in a cosmetic ingredient? Well, it could be a virgin cold-pressed oil, because that's just been pressed once, or it could be a nice organic extract. So let's look at green. Well, equally, a synthetic substance can actually be green. So let's think about green science for a minute, because green science is based upon you basically want to do the least harm to the environment and human health. That's basically how to sum up green science. So a green ingredient will start life as something natural, but as long as the processing was in accordance to green science principles, then that can be a green ingredient, or as we also say, a safe synthetic. Does that make sense? So now you know the difference between clean and green. So brands that say this is clean and green, and then you look at it and there is no differentiating between ingredients, you'll know that it's not quite what it is supposed to be. I frequently get asked to write articles on this subject, and that's normally when I have to go into a witness protection program, because the big boys, they don't like hearing this. But again, this is just really what I was sharing with you, is that if we're going to talk about clean beauty, then clean should have the same definition as clean food. Least processed in its pretty much its natural original state. So this leads me on to the beauty watch list, and y'all have one of these in your bags. And the reason why we put this together throughout our 20 years is because of this very reason. In the EU, we have cosmetic regulations which actually bans and restricts over 1,300 ingredients. It first came into effect in Europe around about the early 1970s, and it's been overhauled and updated no less than 50 times. So you can imagine how many new ingredients come out, each month, each week for cosmetics. Well, the regulations need to be updated by reviewing these ingredients, right? Well, when you look at what's going on in the US, it's kind of sad because I could literally fit the banned and the restricted ingredients on one slide. If you want to look at the EU restricted and banned ingredients, well, that's just like a mile-long Excel spreadsheet, but you can find it on our Cosmetic Research Lab website if you're interested. But right here on the left is the prohibited, which means it's banned. You are not allowed to use that in American cosmetics. And then on the right there is restricted, which means there's only a certain level you can go up to, and then that's it. But I think some of those ingredients on the left are pretty obvious, like do not put chloroform in a topical product, unless you want to put someone to sleep, of course. But I don't want to give anyone any ideas, okay? But it's pretty sad. And the reason why I think that's so important is because of this. Did you know this? The US is the largest beauty market in the world. Are you shocked at that? Well, it's expected to rise to 90 billion by 2020. Now, what's interesting about that is the market has actually shifted, and what we're actually noticing are that consumers are more and more looking for premium products, quality ingredients, in other words, non-toxic, which is kind of interesting when you have a market where there is no regulations. So let's break this down even more. It's no surprise that 80% of those consumers are actually women, and a lot of women are buying these products for the men in their lives. So let's break it down even more. What is it that women want besides a partner that will listen to them? 46% of facial skincare users report using products free from toxic ingredients. More than half of women look for products made from organic ingredients. And then this one's interesting. Brands committed to ingredient transparency have become top of mind for consumers. Now, again, that's interesting because most people don't realize there are no regulations. What happens when there is no regulations in a market? People are just kind of doing their own thing, aren't they? They're putting in what they want, they're saying what they want, they can use what they want, as long as it's not on that 8 banned or 4 restricted ingredients. And I can tell you here, hand on heart, it happens, and it happens too many more times than what it actually should. Now, the definition of a cosmetic in Europe is that it's going to change. There's going to be a change that happens, whether it's through a cleanser or a deodorant, a change happens. Whereas here in the US, well, they just look at cosmetics and personal care as something that's beautifying your skin. But I do want to add on to the end of that Congress has not updated these regulations in, wait for it, 80 years. Does that shock y'all? Are you shocked? I know, it's very disappointing. Okay, so let's look at the fastest growing areas in the beauty industry. Well, it's anti-aging and wellness systems. I want to focus on anti-aging because I think that is a really negative word. And I don't think it should be anti-aging because it's basically saying, no, you're not allowed to get old. You're not allowed to get old. Why can't we use something like well-aging or better aging? Takes the pressure off, ladies, doesn't it? So who's familiar with the Skin Deep database? So you're familiar with it? You're familiar with it? Okay, and Linda's familiar with it. For any of you who are not familiar with it, the campaign for Safe Cosmetics actually launched many years ago, and we were one of the first compact signers. And they've used the EU cosmetic regulations as their yardstick for this Skin Deep database. They had literally hundreds and hundreds of people go out, look at all these products that we all use, and then they, into their system, they put these individual ingredients, and then they give them a safety rating. So then when you go and put your whole finished formula in the system, it gives the finished formula a safety rating. Now, the lower the number, the safer, the higher, then it's potentially very toxic. But there's a slight issue with that. There's a lot of data gaps within their system, meaning that the system doesn't differentiate between organic. And you could have a natural brand like ours go in there with its clean and green ingredients, and we could get a safety rating which is identical to a chemical sunscreen with everything in there that you honestly wouldn't want. So because of those data gaps, it's giving certain ingredients a false rating, if that makes sense. So what we decided to do was, let's just do something fairly straightforward. Let's use classifications instead of individual ingredients. Here's your first classification, which is petrochemicals. You've all heard of these, haven't you? Well, these ingredients are actually made from petroleum and gas. And because there's a lot of ingredients on there, I actually just wanted to pick out one because we are surrounded by this synthetic fragrance. Now, if you've never heard of a doppelganger before today, you'll now know what it is. Twins can be a doppelganger. I could take this finger and put this finger next to it and it would be a doppelganger. It's basically something that is identical to something else. And this is what the fragrance industry use. They use doppelgangers. So when you see something like, hints of jasmine or vanilla on the front of your fragrance bottle, it's not the essential oil. It's a doppelganger, which has been made from crude oil. Does that make sense? Are some of you grossed out? Okay. I didn't mean to put you off, but here's why they don't list ingredients on the fragrance bottle, because the fragrance industry have enjoyed for long time now this trade secret. Because it's fragrance and because there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, doppelgangers in that perfume bottle, they enjoy trade secrets. Neurotoxins. Well, again, if you can't read this, I'll read it out loud what a neurotoxin is. It's basically toxic substances which interfere with the electrical activities of our nerve cells. So it overstimulates them. If you can imagine just having like 3 or 4 coffees, your nerve cell, you're like, yeah, I know how that feels. You just feel so wired. Well, that's how your nerve cells become. And over time, the communication process starts breaking down, and then ultimately we end up with nerve tissue damage. So here are some neurotoxins in our cosmetics. There's aluminium, or should I say aluminum? So what's that in? What do you think of when you think of aluminium in your cosmetics? What's the first product? Deodorant, that's right. Now, how aluminium works in an antiperspirant is it's aluminium salts. And what it does, it's a liquid and it just coats the surface of your skin, and that stops, like a silicone, that stops the sweat coming to the surface. And because the sweat isn't sitting on the surface, it means it's not mingling with the bacteria, which causes the odor. And if you want to know the name of that bacteria, and because it's a Saturday, I'm feeling quite confident. So you ready? Staphylococcus hominis. You like that? That's what causes your smell. It's the Staphylococcus hominis. Now, I would say with aluminium, for women also, there is just a question mark about breast cancer as well. And so a little solution to help, if you just can't do without your antiperspirant and nothing natural has worked, try not to shave before you put the antiperspirant on. Because if there's any nicks in the skin, this is how the aluminium enters your bloodstream. So maybe just shave the night before and then the following morning, pop it on. It's a better solution. Welcome. Hello. Right, so I wanted to also put up on the screen here another neurotoxin. I'm not going to ask anyone to put their hands up, like who has Botox. Everyone's like, no, don't ask to put your hand up. Okay, well, when this first hit the market, there wasn't really any sort of issues surrounding it, because when you have the injection, whether it's around your crow's feet or, you know, the marionette lines or your number 11s, it was actually thought back then that the neurotoxin, this botulism, did not migrate to other areas of your body. But guess what? This concern actually raised its ugly head again back in 2009. And the FDA actually put a warning out, and the warning is, I'll read it with my own eyes, to highlight that botulism toxin may spread from the area of injection to produce symptoms consistent with botulism poisoning, including unexpected loss of strength or muscle weakness. But guess what? People are still using it because they don't know, or they don't read the small print. So for some people, I know friends who have had Botox injections for years, and they haven't really had too many problems. But those who have been using it consistently, they have noticed, you know, when they have the injection now, that there might be a little tiny bit of paralysis in the area where they've had it. So you have to wonder, is the accumulative effects of this actually damaging? So I just thought I'd throw that up there. Again, I didn't want to ruin your weekend for anyone who is using it. Okay, endocrine disrupting chemicals. So for anyone who does not know what their endocrine system does, it basically regulates organs that produce hormones. We're all like, oh, that's the culprit. Well, these ingredients here are actually known. That's why they have little numbers after them, because this is scientific. Scientific studies have actually been shown to disrupt those organs that are producing hormones. So I wanted to, and I know you can't see this is like a spider couldn't even read this, but I am in regular touch with the European Commission, which is connected to the EU cosmetic regulations. And just recently, they have now added 6 more ingredients to this list. And these are in circulation here. And they're not banned, they're not restricted. Everything's fine, business as normal. And so when they start a review, they started this the 16th of May, and it's going to end in a couple of weeks. And then what they're going to do, there's another whole list of 14 ingredients that they want reviewed. So as soon as they hear wind over in Europe that, whoa, what's this? Some doctors are reporting, you know, issues with, you know, hormones and this, that, and the other, they immediately launch an investigation, and that's what we've going on right here. So as soon as those ingredients get added onto the EU regulation list, then we will add them into our beauty watch list. pH disruptors. Who knows what pH is? There is a cruise. You've got a world cruise here. Anyone know? Anyone want to take a stab at it? pH. Okay, never mind. Well, it means potential of, yeah, you already know. She'll do anything for a world cruise, this one. Well, maybe not everything, sorry. Well, it is the weekend, isn't it? You never know. So pH is potential of hydrogen, and it is around us all of us. Your swimming pool depends on a right pH. The eye solutions that you use to go in your eye, that requires a certain pH. And internally, in order to be healthy, we have to be what, ladies and gentlemen? Ding, ding, ding. You've won the World Cruise. Yes. It's going to take 20 years to save up, but I'll give you a no. I owe you, okay? So internally, we need to be alkaline, and that keeps our bodies nice and healthy. And if you look at some people who have, illnesses or who are sick, they will be quite acidic, which is why an alkaline diet is so healthy for you. But guess what? The skin is the opposite. The skin doesn't like alkalinity. Alkaline skin is sick skin. Our skin loves mild acidity because it uses that acidity in order to defend our bodies from environmental pathogens, which we are constantly surrounded by. See, you're learning a lot here, aren't you? I hope you're taking notes. I'm not going to go through this again at the end. Now, ingredients below are what can affect our pH of our skin. Swimming in a chlorinated swimming pool. That's why when you've been swimming and you dry your skin off, that's why it feels really dry and itchy. It's because it's alkaline. And alkalinity strips the skin of all its natural oils, leaving your skin totally exposed. So, retinol's there. Retinol is on actually a list I do in my second. Does anyone use retinol? If anyone's doing Botox and using retinol, I am really sorry to ruin your weekend. Okay, what's the next? Carcinogens. That's another classification. This might well just sort of seem self-explanatory, but if not, these are basically any type of substances that have the ability to cause cancer in living tissue. Now, I want to point out the titanium dioxide there. For anyone who is using mineral sunscreens, don't be alarmed. That is only a carcinogen when it is inhaled, so don't worry too much. I've picked out styrene, and I'm focusing on fragrance again, synthetic fragrance, because styrene is another one of those ingredients present in our lovely fragrances. And guess what? Styrene is present in cigarette smoke. We know how damaging that is. And it's also in automobile exhaust. And styrene is just one of 3,000 of these toxic ingredients that are present in our synthetic fragrances. Formaldehyde and releases, and I was actually just having a conversation with someone about this very subject. So y'all know what formaldehyde is? So what some people don't realize is that, yes, it can be a standalone ingredient which is used, in the embalming process. But it's also used as a disinfectant, and it is known as a carcinogen. So here are some impurities, and here are some ingredients, which we know in these ingredients, formaldehyde is present as an impurity, but this again might be too small. Any easy care fabric which does not require ironing has been treated with formaldehyde. So what they do, they soak the fabric in formaldehyde and then they bake it at 300 degrees. And then that basically means that when you start using that fabric, it won't wrinkle. So you think about Easy Care Fabrics shirts. 90% of Brooks Brothers shirts that they sell, for the gentlemen in the audience here, if you're buying shirts that don't require ironing, then chances are you will have formaldehyde in your shirts. Wrinkle-free sheets. If we buy that bedding for our children or for ourselves, jeans, non-wrinkled jeans, those have been treated with formaldehyde. And that's what we're basically breathing in. So it's a little bit scary, but I think it's good that you know what's going on. Here's another thing I want to share with you. This is not regulated by our lovely Food and Drug Administration. Why? Because it's not on the list to be regulated. There are textile companies here who are producing easy care textiles which are being treated with formaldehyde. And then equally, there's companies abroad who are importing it into this country. And guess what? Those are not regulated either. Truth, not regulated. Do you know what they do regulate? Formaldehyde in plyboard. So at least your walls are safe. You know, and under your floorboards, if you've used plyboards, that's safe. But what you are wearing, that you're breathing in, what you are sleeping on and breathing in, that is not regulated. 1,4-dioxane containing chemicals. Well, this is another nasty one, I'm afraid. It's a carcinogen and an endocrine disrupting ingredient. So you know what that means? It's not just cancerous, but it's also messing with your hormones, girls. You should be mad at that. So let's take a little look. I've just taken a screenshot from the campaign of Safe Cosmetics. They do a lot of these. So they just show you what it's typically found in. It's products that create suds. So in the morning, if you're getting in the shower and you're lathering up and you know you're all nice and clean, looking forward to the day, chances are if you've got ingredients from that previous slide, the laureth, the oleth, the pegs, the polysorbates, sodium laureth sulfate. If that's on the list, chances are you are also being exposed to a toxin which is just not cancerous to living cells, but it's messing with your hormones. And again, the FDA are completely aware of what's going on there. Nitrosamine forming chemicals. Have you heard of this before? Nitrosamines? No? Well, this is a little bit of a double whammy here. Again, I'm sorry about the small print, but sodium nitrate is a substance extensively used in the manufacturing of processed meat products. So anything that's been do you know what it does? It stops the meat from turning grey and smelling horrible. So now you can't sleep on sheets, you can't eat meat. What else? What's left to do? Eh? So it just really helps retain the colour and the freshness of processed meat. But at high temperatures, it has been shown to combine with proteins called amines and form toxic compounds known as nitrosamines. So that's in processed meats. Now, the FDA began watching personal care products for nitrosamines in 1979. What's this year? 2019? Okay, so they've been watching it for a while, haven't they? And they published a report stating that products containing nitrosamines could be seen as adulterated and subject to FDA enforcement. This led to a striking drop, which is good. That sounds good, right? But despite these encouragements, organizations like the Environmental Working Group, which is affiliated with the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, guess what? Found that 1 in every 10 products contain ingredients that combine with others to form nitrosamines. That's not good news, is it? Number 9, here's your other classification. Toxic penetration enhancers. So what the heck is that when it's at home? These are basically ingredients which really drive other actives in that formula deep into your skin. So look at these as little race cars. You know, they go really, really fast. They transport those other ingredients, which could be toxic, deep into the skin. And here are some of the most popular ones right here. I've picked out homosalate because this is actually widely used in chemical sunscreens. Homosalate impacts the body's hormone systems, and in particular the estrogen system, baby making bits and bobs here. So I'm just saying bits and bobs because there's men in the room, sorry. Now, according to the European Commission on Endocrine Disruption, studies show strong evidence of the chemical disruption that the endocrine system goes through by altering hormones. So this ingredient here in our sunscreens is actually altering our hormones. So how do you get around that? Choose mineral sunscreens like titanium and zinc, because they have been deemed the safest in the world as far as safe SPF. Okay, number 10, allergens and immune toxicants. So this is basically, an allergen is known as an antigen. So it's any type of substance that is recognized by the immune system as harmful. And then, of course, your immune system goes into, full defense, and then you end up with inflammation, discomfort, etc. These are all ingredients. Some of these are actually on previous slides. You can see fragrance there. But I've picked out gluten because I know many of us, without realizing it, actually are applying gluten-containing ingredients, particularly if they have celiac disease or a gluten intolerance. And this is what I actually provided David Perlmutter for his Grain Brain book. So I've just kind of put a short list. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's rather sort of some of the most common ingredients found in skincare products. And you've got barley grass, and it goes all the way down to wheat protein. But these are the ones, the main offenders that you would want to look out for if you have a gluten intolerance. And don't think that, oh yeah, I can get away with it. It's not just the topical application and the fact that it is ending up in your bloodstream. Most people are also, they don't think about washing their hands afterwards. You apply a nice facial serum, it might have, say, a wheat protein in it, and then if you're going to eat something, it transfers onto your lips, and now you've got a real big issue if you are gluten intolerant. Number 11, silicone-derived ingredients. We're nearly at the end. Thanks for hanging in there. Who knows what silicone is? Have you seen this in your personal care products or your skincare? It's normally listed on there as, say, dimethicone or cyclomethicone. Well, it's derived from the petrochemical industry. And how silicone works is it sort of acts as a barrier that traps in moisture. That's how it keeps your skin nice and soft, baby soft, like a baby's bottom. It's trapping all that moisture in. Well, the problem with that is it's great that it's preventing, the water from your skin going to the surface and evaporating into the environment, but it's trapping heat, moisture, and bacteria. So if you're someone that's applied lots of products on your body that contain silicone, and then you're going to the gym to work out and you're perspiring, that's why so many people are reporting that their skin is really red and it's irritated as they're working out. It's because of the silicone. Their skin can't sweat. Also, if you have acne, this isn't really an ingredient that you would want to be putting on your skin, because you're trapping heat, moisture, and bacteria, and it's exasperating acne, and it will also do the same for eczema skin conditions as well. Number 12, respiratory toxins. This is probably, you would probably understand this. These are really compounds, and these are mostly man-made, which can either cause adverse effects on your respiratory tract or interfere with its functions. And there's the ingredients there, lots of heavy metals. But again, let me point out, the reason why titanium is on that list is if it was airborne. Let me give you an example. If any of you use mineral makeup in the morning, and you're loading up the brush with, say, your powder, and then you're putting it all over your face, when you're tapping that brush on the side of the container, those particles leave the brush and they become airborne, and you are breathing that in. So if you use a lot of mineral powders, try to avoid being in the vicinity of breathing that in. So something that I use is just a small fan. It doesn't have to be fancy. Get it from the dollar store. Just pop it next to you, not to where it's like really, blowing everything off your face, but just a nice breeze. So as you're tapping it and then you're applying it onto your face, when it does become airborne, it's so light, just a little breeze will just take it away from your facial area. Does that make sense? Okay. Number 13, this is the last one, teratogens. I love saying that, teratogens. This actually sounds like a character from the Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm going to put that idea forward. So teratogens are any agent, substance, organism, condition, and or process that causes impaired prenatal development. So we're basically talking about unborn babies. And all of those ingredients actually have come from all of these other classifications. And these are the ones which can lead to malformations, or even which has happened, and there are clinical studies, death as well. So if you are pregnant, if you are trying to get pregnant, these are the ingredients that you really need to stay away from. But then when you look at these ingredients, you don't often see them listed on an ingredient list because they are impurities. So they're not listed. So I know it's like, so what are we supposed to do? It's a nightmare. So what can you do? Okay, first off, when you go home, I know this is a horrible task. Who decided to eat clean food and maybe eat less processed food and maybe just try to clean up their diets a little bit more? Anyone here gone through that process? Well done, well done. Well, it's kind of similar to the topical products. When you went through your, as we say in England, your larder, your food larder, throwing out things which have got lots of salt or, processed meats, now we know what's in them. Do the same with your cosmetics, because guess what? You don't really need too many personal care products to be clean or to look beautiful. You honestly don't. And try to maybe go, instead of trying to sort of figure out every single ingredient on every single label, maybe just sort of look for brands that have that messaging that you trust. And this isn't me selling what's over here. It's got nothing to do with that. I'm talking about, your shampoos, your deodorant. Just try to make a conscientious decision about the brands that you are buying. Do you trust them? Look at certifications. Look at, what their messaging is. Is it believable messaging? And yes, you can even use this beauty watch list, because we put that together originally for all the clients that we have worked with throughout the years, because they would say, well, we want silicone because, we really want that to be a lovely glide across the skin. You think, oh boy, well, would you be open to maybe some alternatives? And then we would give them the booklet, show them that the clinical studies, are evidence to why they probably shouldn't use that on their customers. While I'm actually talking about this, I do want to say something before it leaves my brain. What a lot of big companies are doing here, and I have been working with them and I have seen it with my own eyes. Because we have very strict standards in Europe, and of course we have non-existent ones here, if a very large brand wants to export their products abroad, well, they have to adhere to that country's cosmetic regulations. Same as if you ship something into, say, China. They have their own regulations. They may be different, but you have to adhere to their regulations. So what happens is you'll have very, very big companies formulate to European standards, which means that there are no harmful ingredients and there are restricted ingredients, and that they are doing their best to ensure the lowest level of toxic exposure to you, your family, and your loved ones. Well, they formulate to EU standards, it gets shipped over, it gets sold in Europe, and then what happens? the versions that are sold here in America, they don't necessarily use the same ingredients and the same regulations. They just abide by the US regulations. So here's a question. Does it mean that the health and the safety of your European customers are more important than that of your American customers? Why can't you just make clean products, period, and not use all of this CRAP in your formulas? So that's a way for you to possibly, you know, start to determine what's safe and what's not. Also, if you do come across more brands like us who do work to EU regulations, that is something that you could potentially trust as well. So here's what we're doing. Besides making clean green, because you all know the difference now, clean green formulas, we have also signed a bill which is called the Personal Care Products Safety Act. And this has been reintroduced by Senators Feinstein from California and, of course, Senator Collins from Maine. So we've signed it. We've been approved to sign it. Now, what's good about this is, and this is really interesting, no one else knows this, so you're gonna have first-hand information here. This bill requires every single company making personal care, beauty, cosmetic products, mandatory registration with the FDA. You're probably thinking, well, don't they have to do that anyway? Nope. Nope. You could go and start your own business from your home. You can make products in your kitchen. You can test on animals. That's another thing we do not do in the EU. You can test it on animals, you know, get a bunny, do what they do here, you know, over in New Jersey. Put those ingredients that you saw on those previous slides. It doesn't really matter about the levels that you're using because you're not breaking the law. So you're okay. Make a nice product. Pop it, you know, on Etsy or, you know, pop it out there, little website, sell your products, and you are completely legal. Well, that company has not registered with the FDA, which means the FDA has no knowledge of what you're doing, where you are, what the heck you're up to, unless a complaint is made. They'll look into complaints, but that's sort of like, you know, closing the gate after the horse has bolted. Let's be proactive here, and let's put something more robust in place. Now, so one, it means that you have to mandatorily register with the FDA. You have to pay some money to register, but it's a sliding scale. So the larger you are, the more money you make, the higher the cost to register. Number two, they are going to look at 5 ingredients a year. So let's do the math here. In Europe, we've banned over 1,300. So if they just do 5 a year, how many years is that going to take to get up to 1,300? Oh, and then by the time we get to 1,300 here, how many more hundreds have been added to the EU? We're never going to catch up, ladies and gentlemen. So here's what we have been chatting with Senator Blackburn's office about, and we were just chatting with them yesterday. We would love Miss Marsha to sign this bill, and we would love her to turn around and say, hey, why don't we adopt a lot of what Europe's already done? Let's embrace those 1,300 banned ingredients. Maybe let's ban some other things that they've been doing over there. And then we can start, you know, looking at 5 ingredients a year, because maybe even if we can just get 2/3 to where Europe is, wouldn't that be a good thing for the American consumer? Don't you think that would be a good idea? Yeah, thank you for that. So that's what we're in discussions with Senator Blackburn's office about. And I think just because, you know, she's so behind anything to do with health, particularly women's health, we're really hoping that she's going to sign this, and then she'll be the one that goes in and says, hey, why don't we adopt a lot of what the EU's done already, because they've done all the hard work. We'll put that in the bill, and then we'll start looking at 5 ingredients thereafter. So here's another good resource, the book, because in there we've got really healthy deodorants, feminine hygiene products, which I'll get into in my next presentation. James will have to leave the room. Paul doesn't care, he's used to it. I think you even might use feminine hygiene products. It's Saturday, come on, we can have a laugh. So there are loads and loads and loads of categories where you can go in and you can even check out non-toxic nail varnishes. Why is that important? Because if you are having acrylic nails put on your beautiful nails, if you are using fast-drying nail varnish, it's got the toluene in it, it's got formaldehyde in it, it's basically got all the stuff in it that oh, another thing that you can't use, nail varnish, take that off the list, okay? So anyway, here's my last slide, just because I love a flying dog. Who doesn't love a flying dog? Which would be a brilliant name for a pub, the Flying Dog, right? Don't you nick my idea now. Don't you nick it. So listen, you know what you have to do. I just want you to go out there and darn well do it. Protect yourselves, because right now no one else is. And if you're not sure about something, you know where I am. Just send me, a snapshot of the ingredient label and just say, I don't know what the heck this is all about. Can I use it and still be healthy? And then I'll get back to you and say, no, you have to buy something else. But no, we're here to help, and that's all we want to do.